I don't see that.
The only one here is
Right to buy was detrimental to the whole social housing system because we lost a lot of stock and that stock wasn't replaced. The money wasn't being filtered into local authorities so that they could rebuild the housing that was lost to right to buy.
It was Mrs. Thatcher whose right to buy scheme was a vote winner for families like the Pattersons. She gave them the title deeds to their council house. They gave her tea in return.
Don't you think this is lovely? And the trouble Mrs. Patterson's taken with it. And Mr. Patterson's a handyman. He's put in all these.
Have the right to sell, which allows people who find problems paying their mortgage to actually become a tenant and stay in their own home, then it would not make any sense to buy a house thinking this house is a long way away from a council house that could be worth a lot in future, because your next door neighbour could become a council tenant. And that begins to change British society.
The right to buy was probably the most popular policy ever introduced by a Conservative government. The left found it virtually impossible to oppose. It permanently changed the balance in politics because once you're a house owner, you're far more likely to vote Conservative than if you were a council tenant.
But what happens after they've taken their right to buy discount, gone and moved somewhere else, and then that house hasn't gone to somebody else who wants to live in it, it's gone to somebody else who wants it as an investment.
The right to buy has been a policy disaster. It has helped individuals, and that's what it was aimed at doing, but it's also raised more funding for government than any of the other privatisations put together. So lots of money taken out of social housing, lots of properties taken out of social housing, and not gone back into it.
The little bits that did go to local authorities came with strings attached from the Treasury, which meant that they weren't allowed to replace the homes they'd sold.
I'm Geeta Sehgal. I'm not a Lambeth resident. I'm here as an outsider to chair this meeting, and I'm really amazed by the turnout on such an amazing sunny day to watch a film about something that's a subject very close to all of our hearts, and which is actually, I think, vital for a sustainable life of any kind. As we know, I mean, if employment is going to be more and more precarious, if people have other issues around health and mental health and so on, if you don't have a home and secure housing, you really can't even think about the basis of a decent existence. And I think the film was a very powerful reminder that all this is at stake. So I'm really pleased that we have a cross-party meeting here, because I think that the mess that we're in our housing crisis is widely recognized across the political spectrum. And I think the parties who are responsible for it are also across the political spectrum. So we can't, say that there are any clean hands in this business, and therefore it's really our job to try and sort it out across a very wide range of political and activist and sort of policy and research and simply of people who are residents in council housing. So the film has been long, and some of you have been waiting quite a long time before the film started, so I'm not actually going to do a very long introduction, because I think we had a very good introduction to the crisis of housing in Dispossession. But what I'm going to do is kick off by introducing the panel, and I'm going to ask the panel to bring us up to date with where they think the issues are now, because there are a couple of issues who pointed out to me that have changed since the film was made. in terms of government policy and so on. So we're going to have a few opening remarks, and we're going to quite quickly open it up to you, the audience, to be able to put questions to the panel. And I'm going to try and get you to keep comments short initially, so that you actually use the experience of the different members of the panel in order to to facilitate the discussion. I want to thank a number of people. The wonderful paintings that we have here. The artist Andrew Cooper, whose artwork we see here, which we saw in the film as well. The Hurst Meath Residents Association and Stand Up to Lambeth for organising the event, and to Lambeth Lib Dems for their kind sponsorship, as well as the architects for social housing, ASH for short, who have collated all the statistics of estates that are due for demolition. And as we know, as you saw from the publicity for the meeting, that the vast majority of estates for demolition are in Labour-held councils. And I mean, that to me was a pretty surprising fact. So,
Wanna get out more?
I should, you're right. So, on my immediate right is Lisa Mackenzie, who's cracking up. She's describes herself as a working class academic and housing activist, is that right? And of course you just saw her in the film. And she wrote the book on estate life, Getting By. On my left here you saw Andy Plant, also in the film. He's a Cressingham Gardens resident and housing activist. He stood as a Green Party councillor last May. And he's a founding member of Stand Up to Lambeth. I'm afraid that Ian Henderson, who is a Labour councillor and led the Save Sutton Estate campaign in another borough in Kensington and Chelsea, he became a Labour councillor through his housing activism, and there are definitely voices like him that we need in the Labour Party. But he has given apologies, I understand, because he had to be somewhere else. Is that correct, Andy?
Yes, he had to go up to Portobello. He lives near Portobello, so he's helping a friend, supporting a friend who's cycling from Portobello in Scotland to Portobello in London to raise funds for a friend who's a Grenfell fire survivor. And so he had to go up a day early, so he has missed today, but he wants to come to the next event and speak.
So left of Andy, there's JJ Thomas. Can you see at the back, by the way? Can you see who's the people sitting?
There's dust everywhere.
I'm asking the people sitting down. No, I couldn't see. I didn't think I'd be able to see the people sitting while I was sitting in a chair watching the film. But if you all can, that's fine. So left of Andy over here is JJ Thomas, who is also a local council resident and a long-time housing activist, and very informed about, she's been challenging demolitions for quite some time. On Lisa's left, or Lisa's right, there's Daniel, who has organized this meeting, and I'm extremely grateful to you, Daniel, for having done this. So he's a local council resident and chair of Hurst Meath Residents Association, and we may hear more about the troubles of the Residents Association and being heard by the council later. There's Tim Briggs on the extreme right. Right in his politics, the sole Conservative councillor for Lambeth, who is here because he's done so much work supporting residents on Cressingham Gardens and Central Hill, facing demolitions of their homes. I'm really pleased that all of you are here today, and I'm...
I know over there, let's do one.
Sarah, I'm so sorry. So, sorry, I'm just losing my nose. Sarah Lewis, who is a Liberal Democratic parliamentary candidate. Is that correct? Am I correct?
Parliamentary candidate for Vauxhall. I'm a long-time Brixton resident.
And focusing on transparency and honesty. And yes, we're particularly grateful to the Liberal Democrats for having sponsored this meeting. So I think, yes, I have successfully introduced all the panel so far. So I'm going to actually ask Councillor Briggs to kick off with just a couple of comments on some of the updates of what's happened with the situation with being able to raise money for housing.
Yeah, so I mean, we were just briefly talking before we sat as a panel. I was just saying that the housing cap has changed now, and you're allowed to borrow as much as you want. Lambeth have decided in their wisdom that they're not going to borrow money in the traditional way. For Homes for Lambeth, they're going to borrow the money from the markets. Anyway, when I put that to them, they said it was because, they said, well, we spent 3 or 4 years sorting this out now, so we don't really want to change our plans. And of course, from where I'm sitting, it looks like the risk is a lot higher if you borrow money from the market. So the market's going to want that money back, and so formally they want it back with interest. But the other thing that I actually thought the film was really good. I thought it was really quite balanced and fair, all things considered. And if you know, on listening carefully to what people said, you know, I didn't disagree with much of what was said. There was one thing that the barrister from Doughty Street Change said, which was that when money was with right to buy, which by the way I think, I know there's lots of people who listen. I'm not trying to. No one in this room is likely to vote Conservative. I know that, but so I'm not here to try and sort of win people over. I'm just going to be honest and tell it how I see it. I mean, I think right to buy is good. I think the problem with right to buy is the money doesn't go back into creating social housing. I think that came out in the film. And I think there was one thing that was wrong with Doughty Street Chambers barrister said. He said that the money from right to buy went straight into the Treasury. Well, traditionally it doesn't actually. The money from right to buy is held by the local authority. It has to spend it within a certain amount of time on council housing. And if it doesn't, it then goes back to the Treasury. Now what Lambeth have done is they've just taken that money and just thrown it into their regeneration schemes. What other local authorities have done is they've spent it on council housing, effectively. And what other local authorities have done is not be very switched on, and they've lost that money because they haven't been able to spend it on council housing in some appropriate way. So they lose it after like 3 or 4 years or something. So that's the only sort of that's just my response to the film. But I thought the film was very good.
So, Daniel, you are a council house resident, and you are. Can you just give us a thumbnail of the kind of struggles you're having at the moment?
I don't quite know where to start, actually.
At the beginning.
Yeah, residents' associations are being closed down to silence any dissenting voices. I remember about 5 years ago, one of our resident participation officers got a particularly notoriously bad reputation as a bully. Was very casually mentioned that the Cressington Gardens residents wanted demolition. Well, I challenged her on that during the meeting, and my relationship with Lambeth and her from 2014 roughly absolutely plummeted. So any individual who dares point out that this is, something's not right here, why would you vote to have your home demolished, they target you. They gaslight you and they bully you. And that applies equally to councillors as well as council officers. And this, there's a campaign, there's a 38 Degree campaign in neighbouring Southwark to prevent try and stop this from happening. But funding is withdrawn. It's an easy way of dismantling organised groups of residents from meeting in a venue where they have to pay a small fee. And that's what happened to us. And interestingly, what this did was trigger me to make contact with Cressingham Gardens and Central Hill, and I've made some amazing friends. Andy, Nicola, Karen, who's been socially cleansed out to Wales, many others. So, and sharing information is powerful, and that's what they do not want, us to meet up and share information. And it's been like a fast track. It's like crunching 5 years of university into about 18 months. And often the information that a lot of it I just didn't believe. It wasn't because I thought that people were being dishonest. It just sounded too extreme. So, and then you meet the person who's been referred to, you find out it's true and it's actually worse than you think. So that's my opening comments.
Well, I suspect that Lisa may add to that comment. So Lisa McKenzie.
Yeah, I suppose my opening comment would be, I hate, this is sort of like a John Cooper Clarke poem, but it's true that things can only get worse. And that 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, I remember there was a housing activist sort of group forming in London, and we were becoming quite powerful actually, up until about 2015. And what was happening is different estates all over London was coming together because we realised that housing was the most important thing, that our housing and our rights to live in a house, we realised that that was under threat. And so what was happening is people started to come together and a movement started to be formed really. And that's where I met sort of the Cressingham Garden people, Central Hill, the Focus E15 mums, the women in Hoxton who fought for their estate. I mean, there was, at one time, there was almost 200 campaigns in London trying to put a stop to regeneration and gentrification. My things can only get worse nurse thing is really about what happened from 2015. I thought we had a growing movement. I actually thought that we were going to challenge power. 2015 come and we had a general election. And what happened in that general election was all the politicians, all of them, and the local councillors and all the local party activists, they pulled all their support from the housing movements. And what they did is they put that into their party political campaigns. And the sad thing is ever since 2015, that is what has been happening. Particularly the Labour Party. What they have done since 2015, because they've been in an internal civil war with themselves, what they have done is they've almost turned their backs on especially council house residents, and instead they've been having an internal war. The consequences of that is that people in council houses, people whose homes are under threat, homeless people, women who are sleeping on their mums' floors with their children, have had no representation at all. And then with Brexit from 2016, all of our political class have turned their back and none of us have got any representation now. So I think that's actually, we made this film in 2015 actually, and it felt like something was happening, and actually the chasm of party politics has sucked in all of that was happening. So I think we are in a much worse position now, and I've got 100 stories. I'm an ethnographer, so I collect stories. I've got 100 stories where I can use that where I can example that if any of you want to ask me.
Well, I think, of course, the purpose of this meeting is precisely to try and, in a small way, start to roll that back, and have that cross-party conversation, and at least in Lambeth, hold the council to account on this. And I know, Andy, you've been fighting for a long time on this as a Crescent Gardens resident. We saw you in the film. So I'd like you to really expand on what was alluded to in the film about what does regeneration mean. It sounds like it's going to bring new life somewhere, and of course we explained in the film that it doesn't, but if you can tell us more, what's happened since the first time.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when regeneration meant an entirely different thing to what it does now. It used to mean in the 80s and the 90s that an estate would be targeted and most of the original errors in the building, etc., would be put right. A lot of places in South London especially had the old walkways, etc., cut away and stairways put in that were well lit, etc. That's what it used to mean. Now, 9 times out of 10, it means at least partial demolition of an estate. In Cressingham's case, the entire estate will be erased, just be bulldozed, and more places put in. As the film stated, Cressingham has medium-high density housing as it is. Lambeth Council plan to put half as many again properties on the estate. It will change the aspect of the estate from the park. Currently, if you're in Brockwell Park, you can't really see Cressingham Gardens unless you're up close. So it doesn't impinge on people in the park. What's being planned will basically dominate the sight line for that part of the park. You'll see Holy Trinity Church, and then you'll just see 5, 6-storey flat blocks facing onto the park. And for no better reason than the council says it needs the money. The actual volume of social housing on each of the estates the council are regenerating will be less than the existing volume of social housing, which means people will be moved out social cleansing. It's kind of a never-ending horror. I'm very committed to fighting on, not least because my wife, who was also in the film, passed away a couple of years ago, and she asked me to carry on the fight, which I would have done anyway. But now it's personal for me. I see these councillors lying, plain-facedly, barefacedly lying, and it really bugs me. We had Matthew Bennett, the guy who's currently councillor for New Homes, saying that £250,000 micro flats, 1-bedroom micro flats in Streatham, were genuinely affordable. Now, you would have to pay a 20% deposit, so that's £50,000. If you're taking out a mortgage, that means you have to be earning around £80,000 per household to service the mortgage. That is not genuinely affordable in a borough where the median household income is less than £30,000. It's criminal and social cleansing.
It seems that Lambeth was actually selected as an experiment that the whole of Britain was going to be subjected to, because it is on the Aylesbury estate, I believe, in that poster over there, that banner over there, that Tony Blair made a speech in which he
was on a tractor.
He was on a tractor?
Or wherever, so he was.
Yeah,
the next day. And that fucking, them buildings are still there. Where's Blur?
So, but he announced the changes in housing laws, which would allow the opening up of, selling off council stock and so on, which kicked that off. And I wonder, JJ...
What he did is announce the social exclusion policies, the New Labour social exclusion policies. That's what he was announcing outside the Aylesbury.
And how did he package those social exclusions?
What he did with the social exclusion, I don't know, do you remember the social inclusion and social exclusion stuff in the late 90s? What it was basically, I wrote a PhD about it, so I know what this is. It was basically a project which was to get rid of working class people. Tony Blair had this sort of aspirational idea that everybody could be middle class and everybody would be middle class. But what we had to do is we had to get rid of the working class.
Yeah.
And what we also had to, so if you were working class, you had to aspire to be middle class. And that was what the social exclusion policy was. So it was about getting people to want to buy, package debt up, be consumers. It was almost like, and there was a
Howard Hughes, like Howard Hughes.
All right, Peter. And there was a whole number of policies that happened over 15 years that was about social exclusion. But what it really was, it was about class struggle. It was about getting rid of working class people through getting rid of working class culture. And that's what he did outside the Aylesbury.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So, JJ, I wonder if one of the things that's been said is that Homes for Lambeth, and I just find this slightly incredible, but I mean, do tell me whether this is correct or not, was actually, there were councillors going to Cannes to do housing deals.
Yeah. They were there last week.
They were there last week. They go every March.
Okay, so tell us what happens. I mean, why are basically British councillors going to France in order to stitch up housing deals?
Most property developers, and they're selling off publicly owned properties at this festival, I call it. It is like a festival in Cannes, and they buy up large swathes of public owned land, estates, sell them off to their developer friends. It's all a huge con. We're being robbed blind, actually. We are being robbed, and I'm in fact, I can't even speak about it anymore because I dream about it, I have nightmares about it all the time. It's like, oh, can't people see what's happening? You know, can't people see what's happening? They're too, we're being bamboozled with this black shit. And I don't care whether we're in or out, because it doesn't matter, because if you're poor, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're, I don't know, I'm a bit overcome actually, because it's something that's really close to my heart, because I moved here to Brixton twixt riots in 1984, and I'd left Wales because we had the miners' strike there and there was absolutely nothing, so I came to Brixton with my small child and lived in a squat on Brixton Hill, because then at least you could squat somewhere, and I squatted in a really nice house and did that really nice. And then the council were offering hard-to-let properties because people didn't want to live in council with the old red brick, which are now going for like £250,000 each. Nobody wanted to live in them then. So if you were a young person, you could get a 3-bedroom flat. You know, move all your friends in. It was a completely different world. Suddenly it's all, I don't know, I can't say anymore. I'm a bit overwhelmed. I just get really sad. You know, don't have the freedom. I don't know where my children don't live, my adult children.
Still living at your house?
Yeah, they're all still living at mine.
Not
My lovely 2-bedroom council flat and secure tenancy, which I thank the goddess for, because I don't think anyone under 30 will ever know that, to have a secure tenancy.
You can't really have a stable existence without stable.
No, it's
that affects all areas of your life. If you're living in
a
anxiety,
stable home is your mental health. Without that, you don't have good mental health.
I just interject, following on from what JJ said.
All of these new estates, and Lambeth have opted to the most extreme end of choosing these options post the Housing Act. We need to touch on the Housing Act and the Localism Act. Is, I think, in Wandsworth, when there's a regen estate, you can keep your secure tenancies. Lambeth, and I'm afraid Lambeth Labour, and we do need to shame the Labour Party, people like me and my mother who's here, and my grandparents, my great-grandparents are founding members of the Labour Party. I mean, it's shameful what they're doing. That any estate that's demolished, that's rebuilt, you have to give up your secure tenancy. And they are so precious. And I had my secure tenancy already threatened back in 2013 by Lambeth, but some dodgy thing which I can't really bother getting into. They had to go and renege on that in the end. But it is really, really bleak. It's secure, and it's always cutting back on the stock. It's reducing the stock all the time and reducing secure tenancies.
So, actually, that was going to be my question to you, Sarah, is what replaces the secure tenancy? And, what are your thoughts as a Liberal Democrat about what should be done about this?
Well, it seems to me as though we're facing two major and avoidable crises. The first being a crisis of home security, and the second being a crisis of trust. The latter potentially being more significant because it's a long-term crisis. But taking them in turn, I mean, it seems as though our starting point here on this panel, and I think in this room for the most part, is that each and every person in our community has the right to a safe and secure home. Lambeth Council's starting point seems to be that the only way to get more social and affordable housing is for people who live in social and affordable housing to be the first people to sacrifice their homes to get there, which seems insane. So I reject that starting point outright. And Tim's mentioned there are many options available to our councillors. A profound short-sightedness, and frankly a profound lack of humanity. And we absolutely must do things differently. When it comes to trust, I mean, trust in this community between all of us who live here as citizens and the politicians who we elect to represent us is just completely shattered. And why is that? It's because lies have been spread, processes have been opaque, individuals have been alienated and isolated, participation has not been meaningful. So I think it really is the responsibility of our elected representatives to start building that trust back up again, and it's going to be really, really hard. So how do they do that? Well, let's start with an acknowledgement that things have not all gone well. Let's have radical transparency in the way that decisions are taken. Let's bring about new opportunities for meaningful participation from all of us. And frankly, let's just put a big fat stop on what is currently planned, take a deep breath, and have some meaningful community participation to move forward. So I think those are the two big things that we need to solve for, and I think we have the solutions if we want them.
I'm going to open up to the floor now, because you've been a very patient audience. We had a very detailed and very compelling film, but a long one, and you've now heard from all the panel. If you'd raise your hands, anybody who wants to speak.
Well, I just wanted to ask Sarah in particular and others, what are all these other options that are allegedly available? That's all.
Tim, do you want to kick off or shall I? Okay. Well, first of all, as Tim says, the cap's been lifted on borrowing, so there's absolutely no reason why our council can't borrow to build. Secondly, even before that happened, there are great examples of councils who have undertaken a meaningful, participatory, community-driven process. One example of that is on the Cambridge Road estate in Kingston upon Thames, where residents have been...
The Lib Dems Council in Richmond are regenerating estates there as well. The Lib Dems are doing it and the Tories are doing it.
They're all doing it.
Your councillors are doing the same thing.
I'll give you a chance in a minute.
Yeah, so
you're finished.
So I was asked about solutions, and I think that it is really important for us to acknowledge where things have gone wrong, but also to acknowledge that not every rebuild is the same. And it's very, very difficult for us to even have that conversation right now because trust is so broken. It's so broken here that it's very difficult for us to have conversation about where things have been done differently. So the reason I mentioned the Cambridge Road estate is that there was an understanding between residents and councillors that there was a problem with how that estate could be policed, and so people were feeling under threat. And that there was a possibility of giving people bigger and better insulated homes in the same place. So as part of that process, no resident has been asked to move away from the estate during the multi-phase rebuild. There is a community board made up of people who have been trained residents, trained in planning and taken with councillors and developers to see what's going on other estates. And absolutely every resident is being guaranteed secure tenancy on the rent that they were paying before. So time will tell whether or not that leads to the two things that I mentioned earlier around secure home and a robust degree of trust between elected representatives and residents, but there are people who are doing things differently. The third thing that I would mention is around community land trusts and the role of the Greater London Assembly, because the GLA has got money, and it's absolutely possible for that money, those loans, that's our money, public money held by London, to go to community land trusts rather than to go directly into the pockets of developers, as has happened on multiple occasions here in Lambeth.
So I'm going to come to you, Tim, and maybe you could say what you want, but also comment on community land trusts and what kind of solution they might be from the bottom up.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, what Sarah said sounds like a good news story, to be honest. And I was contacted before the last election by the Somerton Road Estate, and they had set up a community land trust, and they were having trouble having Labour councillors in Lambeth engage with it in any meaningful way, and ultimately I think they simply didn't. And I went to Hustings for the last election, where Lib Peck would say, the former leader would say, oh, and we've got a community land trust in Brixton, and isn't it one? And I said, well, actually, I spoke to the community land trust in Brixton today on the phone, and she said you lot wouldn't even talk to her. So, and as I said to a room full of non-Conservative voters at that time, things in Lambeth sometimes there's a difference between what gets presented as success stories and what gets presented as the good Labour councillors, the evil Tories, and so on. There's always a difference between the reality and what actually happens. In terms of the question about what would you do, or what are the options? One of the things I did, I've only been a councillor for 5 years, and I was sort of thrown into being leader of the opposition for 4 years, because there were 3 Conservative councillors, 1 Green, 5 years ago. So I ended up leader of the opposition, and I hadn't been a councillor. And one of the things I did is I went to to the guy who was the councillor for housing in Wandsworth, and I said, look, because I realised there was this big issue going on with regeneration. So look, tell me about your regeneration scheme. So what do you do for your consultations? Are they like this? How do you do it? And he sort of went through the process. And I'm sure there'll be people who disagree, but he said, look, we go through it. We're very, very meticulous in making sure that we speak face to face with everyone. Everyone knows what the plan is. Everyone gets an equivalent home. Everyone can come back to the estate. Everyone can choose. Everyone has options. And he said, and this was the thing that stuck with me. He said, because basically, if we don't do that, they won't vote for us. He said, if we don't do that, if we don't consult properly and do it, they're not going to vote for us. So we're going to consult properly. And it's quite a basic thing, really, isn't it? And you think, well, why do all these people vote Conservative? And well, actually, it seems like, obviously not everyone does, but it seems like, well, they're trying to do the right thing. I think. No, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's lots of councils that my colleagues on the panel can call out. Lots of Conservatives are going to say that they haven't done it right here, they haven't done it right there. But that to me is a good news story. That to me is like, well, maybe you could do it a bit more like this. The other thing that I just wanted to point out, so the consultation I think can be done differently. I don't understand why you need to take away people's secure tenancies. My starting point as a lawyer is, well, if you've got a property right, then that's yours. Until it's basically a loophole in the law to say we're going to regenerate this estate, we're going to demolish this estate, so we have to now demote your tenancy. We have to reduce your tenancy from a secure tenancy to something less. I just don't get that. I just think that's shameful if someone, as we were all saying, you have a right, it's yours, you rely on it, it's one of the most important things you have is your right to a home. So I don't see that doesn't happen in Wandsworth for what it's worth. I don't say that because you're all going to go out and vote Conservative, but because it doesn't have to be like it is in that. That's all. And the last thing I just wanted to touch on was, what was it? Oh, can I remember?
Land trust, community land trust.
No, I was just saying about community land trusts. So I don't know that much about them. All I do know is that they've not been successful in Lambeth because basically, Labour councillors and the council officers don't want to give away the power. They don't want to devolve the power to trusts to local people. And the reason for that, I leave to you, but they don't want to do it. There was something else, I can't remember what it was.
Sorry, can I just ask, is that legal, changing someone's secure tenancy to contractual?
It is legal. The ways they're doing it, it's been legalised.
It's a loophole, effectively, because you're saying, well, we're going to get rid of this estate, but in order to provide tenancies for people of some sort.
They give you a choice. They say, if you want to stay on the site, if you want to have a home on the new estate, you've got to hand over your secure tenancy of however many decades. If you want to move out, live somewhere else in Lambeth, start becoming part of a community elsewhere, you can keep your secure tenancy. Now, to me, that's no choice at all. I want to stay with my friends. I want to stay within my community where I feel comfortable and where I feel safe. And I'm not moving for anyone, especially as Lambeth councillors, maybe 15% of them live on council estates. The rest are all either private renters or they're homeowners. I don't like to bring class into it, that's a lie, I do. But
why not?
But when I was a teenager and in my 20s and the 80s, we knew our local councillors. Most of them actually lived on the estates where we lived. So if you had a problem, you went round and knocked on their door. They would make sure your problem got sorted out quite quickly. Now, councillors don't even live in the wards. Or if they do, for example in Tulse Hill, one of our councillors is a landlord. One lives in a very nice £1.5 million home in a private development, and the other is a private renter in a very nice side road. They don't live on Tulse Hill Estate or St Matthew's Estate or Crossingham Gardens or any of the other estates in the ward of Tulse Hill. There's just this total disconnect. So people can't go to their councillors, and if they do, if you go to a surgery, which happens once a month or once every 6 weeks. 9 times out of 10, you'll tell them your problem. They'll email somebody, if you're lucky, and you'll never hear anything about it again. It's almost like people on council estates are second-class citizens.
I just wonder about the loophole being closed.
Does anybody want to answer that? Should I take a couple of questions?
I just wanted to ask if, following on from what Sally has said about legal position, given that regeneration is involved hitherto public land being lost to private ownership, where does that stand legally? Is there some legal or constitutional reason why that can be challenged? You know, if it was public land and it's now private land, what's the law on that?
Well, I think Lambeth leases the land. I think Lambeth leased, at the point of Hurst Lambeth is they're going to lease the land to private developers.
They lease it to Homes for Lambeth.
That's right, they lease it to Homes for Lambeth, Homes for Lambeth then lease it to the developers.
Yeah, that's that Homes for Lambeth capital hold the lease.
Homes for Lambeth.
Any ideas how this stuff's going to change? Because
just hold on a second. Just hold on. Okay.
This stuff's going on constant, and it's going on and going on and going on and going on. Any ideas how we're going to change it? Apart from obviously a word beginning with R and ends in right? Because I was with a Labour MP on Friday night, and she said to me, Tide Mill Gardens, she said to me, it's 50% social housing. I said, how about 100% social housing? And she laughed at me. Alright, we've in Lewisham, we've been putting up for this for the last few years. It's constant. It's not a joke anymore. Anyway, what's the yeah? How are we going to change it anyway? Apart from burning people.
That's a very good question, and there's somebody else wanting to ask a question in the front. Then I'm going to ask the panel to address that. Just hold on.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a comment. I live in a Guinness partnership. We live in a Guinness partnership. We're a housing association. You are so lucky living for councils. You can vote for who looks after you. We can't. You know who your councillors are. We don't know who manages us. We are denied being part of the community. As far as the council is concerned, all they want to know is when our properties become available so they can put in all the antisocial behaviour cases into our streets. We live in a street that is between Kennington Park and Kennington Station. We've seen 2 houses already converted to 6 flats for private sale. They are not allowed to talk to us. We're not allowed to talk to them. We're not allowed to participate with them. Our housing association does not care about us. We have a tenants association that was reformed in 2012 as a paid membership, so people had to pay £10 to be part of a membership for a year. That's a year's membership. That was to pay for the stationery, for holding meetings and all that. We fought so hard, and now the Housing Association, Guinness Partnership, actually works with us and has finally recognised us, because they need us to be able to open doors for them where they can't get into other people, into their properties. We have drug dealers, we have people who are causing terror in our community. They've turned the street from one of the most beautiful streets in London into a dump, and that's because they wanted eventually for their own use. But all I'm saying to you is, say what you want to say. Our local council, Southwark, does not know we exist. Every time we phone up, as long as we pay our council tax, they don't recognise us, they will not help us, they will not do anything for us, because as far as we're concerned, we are under private landlords, except by the definition, we are not private landlords, we're housing association. And I just hope that you understand that you're not the only ones suffering, but we suffer more than you, because we don't have the rights to fight. That's it.
Okay, Lisa, do you want to lead off on, you said you're very depressed about what's happening, you've seen housing's movement being destroyed, but have you got some solutions?
Well, yeah, I've got a solution, actually. Well, I've got some solutions. I'm sure all our local councillors are, not all of them, but some of them, are decent people who are trying to do the best thing.
Few of them.
Some of them. Some of them. But, as you heard here, and I'm not picking on these two, they're just here, what they're doing is they're trying to sort of reform little things that in a broken system. So the old structure is broken. It's like the old structure is wrong.
Yep.
And so what they're doing is they're just trying to find a little thing that they can change.
A ray of hope.
Yeah, but if you are being honest, it's not happening, is it? It's virtually impossible, because what they're trying to do, I mean, land trusts, for example, what land trust is it's about, we've been put in the position where we're having to do this to stop the people that represent us stealing the things that belong to us.
You're talking about Trussell Trust next.
Well,
Food Bank.
Yeah, we won't go there, but anyway. But what a land trust is we're having to come together to stop the people that are supposed to represent us. Because council estates are owned by all of us. So you own it as well. You don't live in one, but you own it. These were original cooperatives. It's like the NHS. Council housing is exactly like the NHS. It's subsidised housing for people so they can afford it, because they realised it was actually before the war, that if you don't have a home, you don't have mental health, you don't have physical health.
It's not subsidised.
No, I don't mean subsidised. What I'm saying is that it was built where we all paid into it.
Yeah.
So not subsidised.
Publicly funded.
Yeah, publicly funded, like the NHS. We all paid into it. And so really we should be fighting for it in the same way that you would fight the NHS for the NHS. But we don't, because what has happened to social housing, to council housing, is it's been stigmatised over the last, and I blame actually the new Labour government for doing that. I think they had a big part to play in that. But one of the things that we have to do is we've got to start to think that our local councils, how are they getting elected? How many people are voting for them? Who is coming out and voting? Well, how is the structure working and how isn't it working? And I think what we need to do is, rather than put faith in this system that never delivers for us, is I think we need to start doing this for ourselves. I think local community groups, setting up your own tenancy associations, I honestly think that's the only thing that we can do now.
I just wanted to give a quick point of clarification to Lisa, who I agree with wholeheartedly, which is that I'm an activist, not a councillor. So I'm with you. This whole developer-led planning process is completely screwed up, and we need to put pressure on the national government to change that. But that is no excuse for us not to hold our current local representatives to account for what they can do within the confines of this current system. So I think it's very, very difficult. Whenever we say from outside the system, this isn't working for us, we're angry, we have been let down by you, the answer is, Tory cuts. Tory cuts, national government, broken system. Absolutely right, but that doesn't mean that our local representatives should get away with doing the wrong thing.
JJ, did you want to say something? Because quite shortly we want to move to a short film, and there might be some comments after that, so you could say something now, as well as later. But
all I want to say is I think the only way out of it, we need to build social housing.
Yes.
It will provide jobs for our young people. You know, we'll learn a trade. Not everyone wants to go to university and have huge debts. Hello. We need more housing. Let's build them.
Yeah, exactly.
And our children.
Also, I
They
think
go to build them. Why is it so difficult when they don't see it? It's
because everyone's got an invested interest in the opposition. So that's the thing, there's a lot of cloaks and daggers going on and nobody really knows who's who. So you could be a councillor with all the right initiatives, but if you're being sponsored by the opposition, obviously you've got a conflict of interest. So I think anybody that wants to go into power should have any of their assets open to the public viewing so they can see who they're being funded by. Because if they're being funded by someone, I don't need it.
If they're being funded by the opposition, then they've got a conflict of interest. So therefore, this makes no sense. So there's no point being with the governor of housing if you own a bunch of properties over there, because then you have an invested interest in lining your own pocket. So I think if we had to expose all of these people who want to run for government and see exactly where their money comes from and how they are paying their way, then there will be a lot of change, and that's where I think it needs to come from. It's transparency, because while people are getting away with this behind the curtain, they're sort of showing us what they want to show us, but we don't know whether that's for our best interest or for their own money, or for their own invested interest. So I think there's a lot of conflicted interests and a lot of people who are being paid off, and it just doesn't really make much sense. And I think transparency is the key, really.
Sure, I just want to say, you're going to say something, Tim's going to say something, and then we've got a very short film. The film is 4 minutes, and I believe the organisers wanted to show it. I know you've sat through a very long film, but there's just 4 minutes. Sorry, I didn't know whether you were. Yes, you can. I've got 3 people in line, so take the panel. Come up here. Then it's easier to get a mic to you. Come up to the front.
So just following on from that, actually, I read somewhere, and I don't know if it was a suggestion, I don't know what political party it came from, but there was something I read recently where someone said, every council officer who has a meeting with a developer should have all of those meetings should be minuted in detail.
There you go.
So there could be no sense that someone had a meeting with, a council officer going to Cannes on some jolly, or councillors sitting in on meetings with developers. Should all be minuted, should all be on public record. And I think if you do that, that would start to change.
People don't have to be aware of what they're doing.
Because then there would be transparency, there would be an openness to it, and I think that would be a really good.
What about green landlords?
What if someone is a landlord? What, a private landlord?
Yeah. So what if you've got? We've got. I think it's something like 50%. At least 50-60% of our MPs are landlords. Yeah. They've got property that
That's
they.
49.2.
All right, thanks, Peter. They own properties that they rent out. So if you've got people that are supposed to be representing us, and their own interests lie in an overheated housing market, then can we really trust them? So we need to think about landlordism. How is that working? Who's getting into power? Whose voices get heard? I think it's the housing crisis is much bigger than housing. Much bigger. And I know we're focused on London today, but I'm from Nottingham, and I have been following particularly women and children that have been moved out of London, and they are now living in old mining villages in Nottinghamshire. And that is because the land in London is worth more than they are. And that is a bigger issue. This is a bigger, so it's not just about housing, it's about who is valued and how they are valued. And so if you are valued only by what your income or your wealth, and you live in a high value area like Lambeth, market logic says that you have no right to be there. And that is what is happening throughout the country. So this is not just about London, this is having an effect all over the country. And then it's not an accident that in these places, in the old mining communities, the places that have been devastated, where I come from and JJ comes from, in the last 7 or 8 years, there's been massive warehouses like Amazon and JD and Sports Warehouse open up that need the cheapest labour. And then they're moving the cheapest people out of the cities to be the most exploited, cheapest labour. So this is not just about housing, this is about the whole system. This is a bigger issue. And I don't think we can solve it by just thinking about what's happening here in Lambeth or in Tulse Hill. I think that this is a bigger problem about the country and how we are valuing people.
I think, one of the things that struck me from what you said earlier about the sort of aspirational push, as it were, aspirational in inverted commas, that some people may have taken it seriously, that in a sense, that what has happened has exposed that rhetoric.
Yes.
And I think it's exposed it across the political spectrum. I think that the Conservative government is also worried about it, and I think, New Labour really can't hold it up. But at the same time, we have, I think there's a picture of Corbyn with the councillor whose home's for Lambeth, Matthew Bennett, who was mentioned, I think, in the film as well. So
Corbyn was endorsing homes for Lambeth.
So yeah, Corbyn was endorsing homes for Lambeth. So that just seems a little extraordinary when really there's widespread questioning about it. But you wanted to say something, and then
I'm not quite sure what I want to say. I want to say I first moved to London to train to be a nurse. I was allocated a council flat because there was basically a desperate for nurses. There was no stigma about council accommodation. It was absolutely fine. At a certain point I had to move to Peabody because of a relationship breakdown within Peabody Association. Now certainly completely stigmatised. I really feel I don't really belong to Hurst Meath. I'm taking losses and all the work and come around to sort of, I don't know, you do substandard work and take ages and treat you like shit. But anyway, apart from all of that, my concern is for all accommodation for the last years, again, hundreds of pounds per week for substandard accommodation with rats and holes in the windows. Obviously, masses of money is being spent on housing benefits, so obviously the government's completely corrupt, putting all this money into private landlords' hands, and all this money is going into providing accommodation. The other side is, I actually think it's really wrong to see people living in social housing somehow subsidised. But the fact is, you're living in poverty for your whole life because maybe you're not a materialist, maybe you're not a capitalist. Maybe you're just living in a home which is affordable, earning as much as you need, living a happy-ish kind of life, as happy as you can be as a human being, with the pros and cons of being human. But you don't own property in London, so you're not sitting on, like lots of people around here, I think probably sitting on fortunes and house prices constantly going up. People like JJ and me, people that we know, we're just paying rent. We're just paying rent, and we've paid rent for decades now, so we can't afford to find anywhere. We actually wouldn't even want to because we don't believe in it. Yeah. We just being human beings, living and breathing, eating and loving each other, hopefully, and caring about each other. And I don't want to be part of that capitalist security culture anyway. And I also do not want to be treated like scum. And I won't treat anyone like scum myself either. And I work with homeless people. I work with refugees, I work with people with serious mental health. I treat them with great respect, and I think we all deserve the same. Whether it's Would you give the mic behind you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things like over there on the banner is what some of the things that people have been writing. So those speech bubbles on there are mainly written by people living in this place called Brimstone House. which is supposed to be emergency accommodation. And this is what's going to happen to people once you start knocking down the estates. You've got to know this, right? So what happens in there, it's like you've got a cell, and your whole family has to be in this kind of room, which is the councillor herself described as it's like a prison. And then the rest of the stuff in there, people took ages to write. So the thing about social services refusing to help mothers, but offering to accommodate children, that took a lot for her to write that. You know what that means? You move to Bradford. If you don't move to Bradford, you're intentionally homeless, we'll take your kids away. What kind of society does that, right? And that's not only, this was from Newham. This, in Lambeth, right, we were working with somebody who had their place demolished, a Guinness block demolished, and then they're told they're put in a place where the rent is put up from £105 a week to £265 a week. This is social and ethnic cleansing. They lose their cafe in Brixton, kicked out of that. Then they're told, go and sign on, you get sanctioned, then you end up not being able to feed your kids, then you kind of, then it's a slippery road, you end up thousands of pounds in debt, so constant threat of being taken to court. And the other thing is, when we're talking about social tenants, like I'm in a Peabody place with Judy, and I feel like we're in a way, yeah, it is, they do come in, you know, when they're doing work, it's always substandard and they make you feel a bit like scummy, whatever, right? But the other thing is like, oh, what about all the people that are in these private places, yeah? And a friend of ours who recently had open heart surgery, and she had to kind of go on to the council to get out of a sublet where she was being treated really badly. And she was texting me, oh, I've been sent to a place, there's dead rats in the corridor, there's urine in the corridor. This is disgusting, right? These landlords, right, they should be put in prison. Yes. I would put them in prison, and I would bloody keep the key, right? And I would make... Okay.
Do you know what?
Was that private now?
Yeah, that was private landlord. I mean, it's disgusting. I mean, how can you be doing this to people? I mean, how can people? And this is 2019. I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah. How can we be telling a mother that if you don't go up to Bradford, we'll take your kids away?
And that's true. That is absolutely
true. It is true. It's bloody true. What's going on?
This is what's been. I mean, people. I brought this banner here because I wanted people to read what had been written down and how much pain that takes for people to write that stuff, and to see a 7-year-old write on there, please stop taking away other people's children, right? This is, and it's completely needless. You know, like, okay, yeah, build more council houses, but let's just stop knocking down the ones that we've got. I mean, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't put somebody out on the street and have all those places in Aylesbury and also on your estate. You wouldn't be doing that. Because it's an unhuman thing to do.
Well, the film shows you don't need to knock down precedent. You don't need to knock down.
Well, the MPs are worried about having to go home. They got, at the moment, they have to go home in taxis. Bloody hell, was they bothered when they were fucking voting through austerity fucking shit? I mean,
Pete, let Hannah speak. She's next.
Yeah, right.
Hello, I have a question for Lisa. I'm from quite a middle class background, and I know a lot of people who are very anti-working class, very very contemptuous, and I feel like maybe in the last 15 years class politics has been intentionally replaced by identity politics, and I wondered if you feel it's an intentional thing to kind of distract people from things that are going on, to be instead of obsessed about things like people's identity instead. What your thoughts were about that?
Thank you for that question. I mean, definitely where we are now, there is an absence of discussion around class, and there's an absence of language around class. And I think that is intentional. I mean, you know, I write about all sorts of things, but one of the things that I've written about, and I do this because I'm odd, but I for 2 years I watched news programmes, daily politics, etc. And I listened to Labour MPs, and I counted how many times they said working class. And they don't say it, they say working people. And also, I counted how many times Owen Jones said working people as well. And so what I did is I started to find out that not only are working class people being removed from public we we're not getting into Parliament, we're not getting on the councils, we're not getting, we can't even be actors anymore. The most elite job there is an actor. You've got to have gone to Eton to be an actor. And so not only are we being removed physically, the language is being removed as well. And that is right. I'll be honest, the only person that talks about working class is Theresa May, which is a strange thing.
No, she does the same thing. So she did this in the last general election. She started saying working people. And what they've been doing is putting working class people.
I know. But what I'm saying is the Tories are the only people that actually use the term working class. And the reason, look, there's a reason why they do that. But it's not, but they do use it. The Tories use that.
I only hear them say working people.
No, they say working class people.
They hit working people against working class people, and that drives me.
But that again, that's about language. That's about the way language is being, because what is working people and what is working class? Working class, if you say working people, you are taking the politics out of class struggle. And so that's why you say working class, because the class bit is the political bit. That's about power. And so the reason I think the Tories are quite happy to talk about working class people and middle class people is because obviously they have no problem with class, because it's a good thing for them. Class inequality. I meet many politicians from all spectrums, and they actually think that class inequality is a good thing. It drives ambition, it drives entrepreneurialism. And so the groups of people who have no problem with class inequality actually are all right to talk about it because they've got no problem with it. Whereas the Labour Party does have a problem with class inequality because they realise that they're supposed to be representing working class people.
They ain't anymore.
Look, I'm gonna have
this
is a great discussion to have a word with, and we all need a drink after this. We're going to have a 4-minute film, which I hope somebody's there ready to put on. Where is it? Is there someone there? Yes. Is it happening?
There are no car spaces, no electronic charging, nothing, all the way through, and there's no